My name is Claire Wilson, and this Christmas I finally learned what it truly means to be free. Let me tell you how I discovered that sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from those who never deserved your love in the first place. The text message from my mother made me nearly burst out laughing. Honey, don't come home for Christmas this year. The heating is broken and it is freezing cold. Last year she claimed the water pipes had burst, and the year before that she insisted there was a neighborhood power outage. Each excuse she concocted to keep me away from home during Christmas became more ridiculous than the last. What she really wanted was for me to convert my Christmas gifts and holiday bonus into cash and send it to her, so she could continue spoiling her precious son. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Share your advice below and subscribe to see how my story continues. And then, I made a decision that changed everything. I couldn't be bothered to expose her lies. I simply replied with a single word, okay. Then I immediately booked 5 first-class tickets to Florida for my in-laws, my husband, and my daughter. We were going to have a real vacation. The moment our plane touched down, my mother Amy's relentless phone calls began. Her voice was shrill with rage on the other end. I told you not to come home. Who gave you permission to go to Florida? You've blown all your money, and now your brother and I will have nothing for Christmas. My phone buzzed frantically in my beach bag like a dying fish. I ignored it completely. The salty ocean breeze caressed my face, carrying with it a sweet taste of freedom. My daughter Ruth giggled as she chased tiny waves across the sand, while my in-laws sat beneath a nearby umbrella, their faces relaxed and content. Jake, my husband, handed me a glass of ice-cold coconut water, his eyes gentle and loving. This was what Christmas should feel like. This was what family truly meant. The phone's buzzing stopped momentarily, then resumed with even more frenzied intensity. I knew it was Amy, my mother. She never gave up easily. Jake frowned and said softly, "Don't worry about her. Let me handle this." I shook my head and took the phone from his hands. Some executioners, I had to face myself. I swiped to answer and turned on the speaker. The sound of waves crashing against the shore carried through the phone. "Claire, where the hell have you been? Why aren't you answering your phone?" Amy's shrill scream pierced through the receiver with enough venom to rupture my eardrums. I held the phone away from my ear and took a sip of coconut water. "Answer me," she roared from the other end. "I am in Florida, Mom," I said calmly. My voice as even as if I were commenting on the weather. There was a stunned silence on the other end, followed by an even more violent eruption. "Florida? What are you doing in Florida? I told you not to come home. You've wasted all your money. What are your brother and I supposed to do? We'll freeze to death this Christmas." Her voice was filled with the fury of betrayal and the righteous indignation of someone accustomed to taking. I could almost visualize her at that moment, spittle flying and her face contorted with rage. "Do I need anyone's permission to spend my own money?" I asked lightly, each word wrapped in ice. "You ungrateful brat. I wasted all those years raising you. You think you are so important now, don't you? I ask you to send a little money home for Christmas, and instead you run off to waste it on yourself. Do you think money grows on trees? Don't you care about your brother at all?" She began her usual tirade. Those tired old accusations like rusty knives, scraping repeatedly against my ears. For the past 30 years I had heard them so often that my ears had grown calloused. "Ungrateful brat." I laughed softly, the sound completely devoid of warmth. "Let me give you some numbers, Mom. The Christmas before last, when you told me not to come home because of the power outage, I transferred $20,000 to you. Last year, when you claimed the water pipes had burst, I sent $25,000. Add up all the other miscellaneous expenses. Every time your son needed a new phone or money for his girlfriend, who do you think paid for it all? Just last year alone, the total of my transfers to you and my dear brother came to $87,364.50. My memory was excellent, especially when it came to these painful figures. The cursing on the other end stopped. Only heavy breathing remained. I continued without giving her a moment to recover. Just last week, didn't Brian get a latest iPhone? That cost over $10,000. Where did he get that money? Did it fall out of your broken heater? Dead silence. Long telling silence. Amy was speechless. I knew I had hit her where it hurt most, tearing away the facade of maternal love she used to justify everything. A few seconds later, the phone erupted with her rage-filled cursing. Vile and ugly, as if she wanted to pile every poisonous word in existence upon me. I wasn't going to give her any more opportunities to perform. I hung up directly, with a light touch of my finger on the screen. I dragged that familiar number into my blocked contacts list. The world became instantly peaceful, and the sunshine was perfect. My mother-in-law looked at me with concern, wanting to speak but holding back. Jake walked over and said nothing, simply taking my hand firmly in his warm, dry palm. I forced a smile for them, trying to make it look genuine. It is nothing, just a sales call. Let's keep enjoying ourselves. It is rare that we get to spend time together like this. I took a deep breath, forcibly pushing down the emotions churning in my chest. It was a complex mixture of satisfaction, exhaustion, and melancholy. 30 years of suppression had finally torn open a small crack today. I knew this was only the beginning. My phone didn't stay quiet for long before Jake's phone started ringing. Aunt Amy flashed on the screen. We looked at each other, both understanding the situation perfectly. Jake immediately pressed silent and placed his phone face down on the beach table. Within minutes, a WhatsApp group called Family Group began exploding with messages. My phone screen was dominated by notifications and red dots. I opened it to take a look. Amy had posted a screenshot of me blocking her, the red exclamation mark particularly glaring. This was followed by dozens of voice messages from her, one after another. I didn't bother listening to them. I didn't need to hear them to know what they contained. It would be nothing but tearful complaints and accusations, painting me as an utterly heartless and ungrateful daughter. Sure enough, all the aunts and uncles who had been lurking silently in the group for years suddenly emerged. Claire, what is going on? How could you block your mother? It is Christmas time. You should apologize to your mom. Mothers and daughters don't hold grudges overnight. Your mother worked so hard to raise you. You can't break her heart like this. These words came so easily, spoken from their moral high ground, painless and meaningless. They didn't know the background or context, or perhaps they simply didn't care. They just wanted to enjoy the false satisfaction of playing peacemaker. Then Brian, my 25-year-old giant baby of a brother, finally made his entrance. He tagged me directly in the group. Claire, what is your problem? Apologize to Mom right now. Send the money. His tone was righteously indignant, as if I owed him millions of dollars. Jake saw what was happening and wanted to type a defense on my behalf. I pressed down on his hand to stop him. Don't, I told him. There is no point trying to reason with people who are pretending to be asleep. Their goal wasn't to solve the problem but to force me to surrender. Any explanation would be seen as making excuses in their eyes. I took my phone and calmly moved my finger across the screen. I didn't reply to any of the messages in the group. Instead, I opened my camera and took a photo of the beautiful blue sea and sky before me, capturing the iconic palm trees and beachfront villas in the distance. The picture showed brilliant sunshine, crystal clear water, and at my feet sat an elegant margarita. I posted this photo to the family group chat, accompanied by a simple message, Merry Christmas. After sending it, I immediately turned on Do Not Disturb mode. The world returned to tranquility once more. I could imagine the explosion happening in the group at that moment. Amy's wailing, Brian's fury, the relatives' shock. It must have been quite a spectacular drama. Unfortunately, I had no interest in watching. My phone screen lit up once with a private message request from Brian. I accepted it. The next second, a stream of insults filled my screen. You selfish witch. You have money to go enjoy yourself, but you don't care if Mom and I live or die. Are you looking for trouble? Do you believe I'll make it impossible for you to stay at your company? Just wait. I am coming to your house and your office right now. I'll ruin your reputation. The words were filthy and vicious, full of impotent rage and empty threats. I watched expressionlessly, calmly scrolling and taking screenshots of every insulting message, saving them all without missing a single word. These would all serve as evidence in court. A warm hand gently touched my shoulder. My mother-in-law brought over a plate of cut fruit and placed it in front of me. It included my favorite mangoes and mangosteens. She glanced at the offensive language on my phone screen, but didn't ask questions. She simply said softly, "Don't pay attention to them, Claire. You did the right thing. Mom supports you." Her voice wasn't loud, but it flowed through me like a warm current, instantly driving away the last trace of coldness in my heart. I looked up at her, my eyes beginning to well up. This was family, someone who would stand firmly by your side when the whole world was condemning you. Someone who would tell you, "You are not wrong." I nodded and put my phone aside, picking up a piece of mango and putting it in my mouth. It was sweet. Sweet all the way to my heart. Brian's threats continued. His private messages slithered like a venomous snake, persistent and unrelenting. "You think hiding in Florida will save you? I am telling you, you can run, but you can't hide forever. Send me 50,000 right now, or I'll be at your company tomorrow with protest banners. I'll let all your colleagues see what kind of person you really are, an ungrateful daughter, a blood-sucking leech." Looking at the jumping text on my screen, I felt nauseated. Not from fear, but from disgust. I never realized a person could be shameless to this degree. He seemed convinced that what I cared about most was my respectable job and my management position. He thought that by threatening this, I would surrender just like I had countless times before. Unfortunately for him, he was wrong. When oppression reaches its extreme, rebellion doesn't come through arguments or tears, but through cold, calculated reckoning. I closed my chat with him and opened my photo gallery and cloud backup. This was going to be an enormous undertaking. I spent a full hour searching through and organizing all the chat records from the past few years where Brian had asked me for money under various ridiculous pretenses. "Sis, I am out of living expenses. Send me 5,000. Sis, I saw some shoes I like. They're over 3,000. Sis, I scratched someone's car. I need 10,000 for repairs. Sis, my girlfriend is pregnant. I need money for an abortion." One after another, case after case, shocking in their audacity. Next, I opened my banking app and payment software to find transfer records. Screenshots of payments for his latest iPhone. Screenshots of orders for his high-end gaming computer. Screenshots of credit card payments I had made on his behalf time after time. Each transaction was clearly documented with dates, amounts, and purposes. I stitched these screenshots together into an unprecedented long image. At the very top was Brian's screenshot from the group demanding I send money. At the bottom were his recent vile insults and threats. I didn't blur out any of his information. I wanted everyone to see his greedy and ugly face clearly. After completing this compilation, I reopened the family group chat. It was still bustling with activity. Amy still crying with voice messages, and several aunts still offering fake sympathy. I didn't say a single word. I simply dropped that long image, concentrated from years of my blood and tears, directly into the group. The image took a few seconds to load. During those few seconds, an eerie silence fell over the group. Then I typed a single line: "My brother Brian is 25 years old and a healthy adult, but all of his expenses have always been my responsibility. This year, I just wanted to rest and spend a good Christmas with my in-laws and family. Please tell me, what did I do wrong?" Send. The world seemed to have been put on mute. The group fell instantly silent. The relatives who had been taking sides before acted as if they had collective amnesia, not uttering another word. A few minutes later, one cousin cautiously typed, "Brian really should learn some responsibility." An uncle followed up, "Yes, he is a grown man. How can he keep depending on his sister?" The tide turned instantly in the face of irrefutable evidence. Amy must have realized what was happening because she began frantically trying to delete the crying voice messages she had sent earlier. 1, 2, 3. Her clumsy attempts were like trying to cover up the aftermath of a poorly executed performance. Finally, when she realized nothing could be salvaged, she did something I never expected. She disbanded the group chat. That family group that had been the venue for countless instances of moral manipulation and false family sentiment simply disappeared. Brian also vanished completely. He never sent me another word, not even a punctuation mark. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long breath. An unprecedented sense of relief washed over my entire body. It was like someone who had carried shackles for 30 years had finally broken the chains with their own hands. Sunlight streamed through the window onto my body, warm and comforting. I knew I had won the first round of this war. The Florida sunshine and ocean breeze healed the internal wounds I had accumulated over years. When our vacation ended, our family returned to Chicago refreshed and glowing. Life seemed to return to normal. I thought that my complete victory in that online battle would keep Amy and Brian quiet for a while. I underestimated their shamelessness. The next afternoon, I was at home building blocks with Ruth when the intercom suddenly rang sharply. On the screen was the familiar face of old Zhang, our security guard. "Mrs. Wilson, there are 2 people downstairs claiming to be your mother and brother. They insist on coming up." "What should I do?" Old Zhang's tone was troubled. Through the intercom screen, I could see Amy's face behind him, filled with anger and bitterness, and Brian impatiently smoking a cigarette. They had found their way here after all. "Mr. Zhang, I don't know these people," I said without emotion. "Please follow the community regulations. Thank you." "Ah, okay. Sure." Old Zhang was momentarily confused, but then understood my meaning. I hung up the intercom. Jake came out of his study, his face darkening. "They're here." "Yes, I'll go down and handle this." He reached for his jacket. "Don't argue with them. Just have security ask them to leave. If they cause trouble, call the police," I instructed. I knew there was no point trying to reason with them. Only rules and a firm attitude would work. Jake nodded and hurried downstairs. I went to the window and pulled back a corner of the curtain to coldly watch the drama unfolding below. Jake's figure appeared at the building entrance. He spoke briefly with security guard Zhang. Zhang nodded, then walked toward Amy and Brian, who were sitting on a flower bed. When Amy saw Jake, she exploded like a lit firecracker jumping up from the flower bed. She rushed to Jake's face, pointing at his nose and unleashing a torrent of abuse. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but from her twisted features and exaggerated gestures, I could guess how vile her words were. Jake remained restrained throughout, standing there calmly like a solid wall. Brian lounged carelessly to one side, acting like he was enjoying the show. Gradually, neighbors gathered around, pointing and whispering. Amy seemed even more energized. She plopped down on the ground and began slapping her thighs while crying dramatically. "There is no justice in this world. My son and daughter-in-law don't recognize their mother. I worked so hard to raise my daughter, and now that she is successful, she won't even let us through her door." Her wailing was sharp and piercing, echoing throughout half the community. Brian added fuel to the fire from the sidelines. "Everyone come see. This is what a college graduate looks like, a company leader who doesn't even want her own mother." I watched all of this with cold detachment. There was no anger in my heart, only a desolate emptiness. I saw Amy suddenly leap up from the ground and raise her hand to strike Jake. Jake instinctively stepped back, and security guard Zhang quickly intervened, grabbing her arm. "Ma'am, please calm down. If you get physical again, we'll have to call the police." The security guard's stern warning froze Amy's movement. More and more neighbors gathered, and the murmuring grew louder. They had probably never witnessed such a shameless display before. Amy and Brian looked like 2 clowns putting on a humiliating show in our community. Eventually, faced with the security's firm attitude and the neighbors' contemptuous stares, they slunk away in defeat. Peace returned downstairs. Jake came home looking exhausted. "They're gone," he said. He took my hand and shook his head. "They won't give up easily." I looked out the window as the sky gradually darkened. "I know." My voice was calm and resolute. "This war has only just begun. I wouldn't retreat anymore. Not one step." The peaceful days lasted less than 3 days. Amy's fighting spirit exceeded my imagination. She had somehow discovered my company's address. That afternoon, I was in a meeting with my team when the receptionist rushed in, her face pale. "Claire, downstairs. There is a lady causing a scene. She says she is your mother." The conference room fell silent immediately. All my colleagues' eyes focused on me with curiosity and scrutiny. My heart sank. My worst fear had come true. She was going to bring this war to my workplace, to the foundation of my livelihood. My direct supervisor, Mr. Williams, a steady man in his 40s, frowned. "Go handle this first. We'll pause the meeting." I nodded and quickly left the conference room. Before I even reached the reception area, I could hear Amy's familiar, penetrating cries. "Where are your company's managers? I want to see your bosses. Your company has corrupted my daughter. You've taught her to turn against her own family. I worked so hard to raise her and send her to college, and now that she is successful, she abandons us." A crowd of curious colleagues had gathered around the reception desk, whispering among themselves. Amy sat disheveled on the floor, slapping the ground like a complete madwoman. When she saw me emerge, her eyes lit up and her wailing grew even louder. "Claire, you heartless creature, you finally decided to show yourself. Tell your bosses whether you are abandoning your mother and brother." I stood frozen, feeling as if all the blood in my body had turned to ice. Embarrassment, humiliation, anger. Various emotions churned in my chest like a tempest. I felt like a prisoner stripped naked for public display, subject to everyone's judgment. This was her goal. She wanted to destroy my dignity, my career, using this most primitive and savage method to force me to surrender. Mr. Williams followed me out. Seeing this scene, his expression became stormy. He didn't acknowledge the ranting Amy but spoke directly to the receptionist and security. "Please escort this woman out." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried authority. Security immediately stepped forward and lifted Amy from both sides, dragging her out despite her struggles and screaming. The drama finally ended, but its impact spread like ink dropped in clear water. The way my colleagues looked at me became complicated. Mr. Williams called me into his office. "Do you need a few days off to handle family matters?" He handed me a bottle of water. I gripped the cold bottle, my fingertips trembling. "I am sorry, Mr. Williams. I've caused trouble for the company." "This isn't your fault," Mr. Williams said, looking at me without blame, only understanding. "Every family has its difficult chapters. However, Claire, some things can't be dragged out indefinitely. It is better to endure short-term pain than prolonged suffering. You need to resolve this once and for all thoroughly." Mr. Williams' words hit me like a heavy hammer. Yes, resolve it thoroughly. I couldn't remain passive anymore. I had to take the initiative and end this once and for all. Coming out of his office, I returned to my desk, declining the concerned inquiries from colleagues, whether genuine or not. Only one thought occupied my mind. This war must end by my hand. Jake suggested I seek help from community services or relevant authorities for mediation to create an official record that would prevent further harassment. I refused. I knew that for people like Amy and Brian, any gentle approach was a joke. They didn't understand reason. They only respected force. I had to find the hardest punch and knock them down so they could never get back up. I began considering the worst-case scenario. If I lost this job, if my reputation was completely ruined, what would I do? As I pondered this, an idea that had been buried for years gradually became clear. Perhaps it was time to open that Pandora's box. Just as I was steeling myself to play my final card, Amy's call came through to Jake's phone. This time, she wasn't crying or cursing. Her voice was weak and filled with suppressed sobbing. "Claire, Mom is sick. Cough, cough. The doctor says it might be cancer. Mom wants to see you one last time before she dies. Jake put the call on speaker, and I stood beside him, hearing every word clearly. My first reaction was the boy who cried wolf. What new scam was this? But her coughing sounded so real, and the despair in her voice didn't seem fake. Blood relation is such a strange and terrible bond. Even though I hated her to my core, when I heard cancer and before death, my heart involuntarily clenched. What if it was real? Could I completely ignore a dying mother? I couldn't. Jake saw my wavering. I'll go with you, he said firmly. Whatever the situation, I'll be by your side. I nodded. We didn't go empty-handed. Jake quietly activated his phone's recording function and placed it in his jacket pocket. We returned to that old house where I was born and raised, which also held countless nightmares for me. The hallway was dark and damp, filled with the smell of decay. I knocked on the door. It opened quickly. Brian answered, glanced at me with evasive eyes, and silently let us in. The ominous feeling in my heart grew stronger. In the living room, Amy sat perfectly fine on the sofa, her complexion ruddy, showing no signs of illness. When she saw me, calculating light flashed in her eyes. I understood immediately. This was a trap. I turned to leave. Bang! The security door behind me was locked by Brian. He pocketed the key and blocked the doorway, a cold smile on his face. Now that you are here, don't think about leaving. Amy stood up from the sofa, walked over to me, and held out her hand. Stop wasting time. Give me $50,000. Her voice had returned to its usual shrill righteousness. For Brian to buy a house and get married, that is your responsibility as his sister. I trembled with rage, not from fear, but from extreme anger and disappointment. I had actually still harbored final hopes for her. What a complete fool I was. In your dreams. I squeezed the words through gritted teeth. I pulled out my phone to call the police. Brian lunged forward to grab my phone. Jake immediately stepped in front of me, pushing Brian away. The three of us immediately began struggling in the cramped living room. In the chaos, I was pushed and stumbled heavily against an old wooden cabinet by the study door. The cabinet shook violently, and a dusty metal box on top fell down with a crash. Brian's eyes immediately lit up. Money. It must be Dad's secret savings. He pounced toward the box like a madman. I instinctively lunged forward too, desperately protecting the box. I didn't know what was inside, but I absolutely couldn't let him take it. Brian and I rolled on the floor like two wild animals, fighting and clawing at each other. Jake tried to help me, but Amy wrapped herself around his legs. In the chaos, the box's clasp broke open and its contents scattered across the floor. There was no money, no gold bars, only several yellow documents. My gaze was drawn to one particular document like a magnet. It was an adoption certificate. The adoptee's name was Brian. Beneath the adoption certificate was another document, a property deed transfer agreement. The agreement clearly stated in black and white that when I was 18, my father had already transferred this house to me. Below that was a bright red notary seal. Time seemed to freeze at that moment. I knelt on the floor, holding that thin piece of paper that weighed as much as a mountain. The adoption certificate for Brian, my brother, who wasn't actually my parents' biological child. I slowly raised my head, looking past the stunned Brian to Amy. What is this about? My voice was terrifyingly calm. Amy's face turned deathly pale in an instant. Her lips trembled, her eyes filled with panic and confusion, like someone stripped naked with all their darkest secrets exposed to daylight. You don't talk nonsense. That is fake. She was still trying to deny it, but her trembling voice betrayed her. Brian was thunderstruck. He snatched the adoption certificate from my hands, staring at the words with wide eyes. Impossible. This can't be possible. I am my parents' biological son, he muttered like a madman, ignored his breakdown. I picked up the other document, the property transfer agreement, and displayed it before them. And there is this. This house was transferred to me by Dad years ago with official notarization, so this house is mine. Each of my words was like a nail being hammered into their hearts. Brian's anger instantly shifted from shock about his origins to hatred toward me, the usurper. With bloodshot eyes, he roared at me like an enraged beast. Even if I am adopted, I am still more family than you. Mom loves me most. This house is mine. It is mine. His twisted face looked so foreign and pathetic at that moment. Looking at him, the last trace of sibling affection in my heart evaporated. Amy completely broke down. She collapsed on the floor, pounding the ground with her hands, finally screaming out the secret that had been buried for over 20 years. Brian isn't your father's biological son. He is my ex-boyfriend's child. When his father died, I felt sorry for him and brought him home. Your father, that weakling, agreed to adopt him just to keep me, to keep this family together. I treated you poorly because seeing you reminded me of your useless father. I gave all my love to Brian, and I am not wrong. I am not wrong, she screamed hysterically, as if she were the greatest victim of all. So that was it. The 30 years of favoritism and exploitation stemmed from this. I wasn't her daughter, but merely the target of her resentment toward her husband. Brian wasn't her pride either, just a tool to compensate for past regrets. We were both victims of her selfishness. I stood up, looking down at them with cold detachment in my heart. Dad called me to his bedside alone before he died. He gave me this transfer agreement and told me not to take it out unless absolutely necessary. He said I should give you both a final bit of dignity. I paused, looking at Amy's ashen face. Now it seems you don't want that dignity anymore. With that, I pulled out my phone in front of their shocked faces. I didn't call the police. I called a locksmith. Hello, I need to change locks. The S is yes. All the locks in the house need new cores. Please come now. I'll pay extra. On the other end of the phone, Amy collapsed on the floor, her screaming curses turning into desperate wailing. Brian stood like a statue, completely frozen. I knew this war was about to reach its conclusion. Brian snapped out of his shock, his last shred of sanity consumed by madness. The house is mine. You can't take it away. He roared like an uncontrolled beast, lunging at me, targeting the property deed and documents in my hands. Jake stepped in front of me, forming an impenetrable wall with his body. He grabbed Brian's wrist and pushed hard. Brian staggered back against the wall. Brian, calm down, Jake shouted sternly. Calm down, how can I calm down? This witch wants to steal my home. Brian completely lost it. He began destroying everything in the house. Cups and remote controls were swept off the coffee table, crashing to the floor. He kicked over the television stand, sending the LCD television crashing down with a shattered screen like a spider web. The entire house was instantly in ruins. Not only did Amy fail to stop him, she crawled over and clung to my legs. Claire, I beg you, just give the house to your brother. You are married now, you have your own home, you can't compete with your brother. This is all he has. Do you want to drive him to his death? Her cries were like a rusty saw, scraping back and forth against my last nerve. For 30 years I had heard enough to make my ears collused. I looked down at her, at that face streaked with tears and snot, written with selfishness and obsession. My last trace of blood-related pity disappeared completely. This woman had never loved me, in her heart. I wasn't even worth as much as a complete stranger. I lifted my foot, trying to break free from her grip. Jake had already pulled out his phone. Without hesitation, he dialed 911. To avoid escalating things beyond repair, he didn't mention robbery but used gentler terms. Hello, 911. This is Oak Street number. There are people who have illegally entered private property and are using violence to threaten the homeowner's safety. Please come immediately. His voice was calm and clear, accurately conveying the address and situation. The police arrived quickly. When they pushed open the door to see the chaos and U.S. struggling, they immediately restrained Brian, who had completely lost his mind. Faced with uniformed officers, Amy continued her deceptions. Officers, you must help us. This is my daughter and son-in-law. They want to steal our house and throw us out. They even hit people." She pointed at Jake, making false accusations. I said nothing. I simply walked over to the police and showed them the adoption certificate, property transfer agreement, and notarization one by one. Then I opened my phone and displayed the screenshots I had organized earlier of Brian's insults and threats, along with the long record of transfers. "Officer, I am the legal owner of this house. This is Amy, my mother. This is Brian, who, according to this document, is Amy's adopted son and has no legal support or care relationship with me. Today, they used deception to lure us here, locked the door, demanded $50,000, and when that failed, began destroying property and physically attacking my husband. My husband's phone in his pocket recorded everything. My voice was emotionless. All the evidence formed a complete, irrefutable chain. Amy's wailing gradually subsided. Brian lowered his head, no longer daring to shout. The police's expressions became serious. After listening to the recording on Jake's phone, the truth was undeniable. They gave Amy and Brian a stern lecture, warning them that their behavior today constituted illegal trespassing and intentional property damage. Watching them bow their heads submissively before the police, speechless and cowed, I felt no satisfaction, only a desolate calm. This farce needed to end. After the police left, the locksmith arrived. Under Amy and Brian's desperate gaze, he skillfully replaced all the lock cores in the house. The new keys lay cold and solid in my palm. I opened the door and packed all of Brian and Amy's belongings, scattered throughout the house, their clothes and daily necessities, into several large black garbage bags. Then I threw them bag by bag into the hallway outside. I gave them no dignity, just as they had never given me any standing inside the door. Speaking through the crack to the two people collapsed in the hallway with vacant stares, I said, "I am giving you 1 week. Find somewhere else to go. After 1 week, I am completely clearing out this house for renovation." With that, I prepared to close the door. Amy suddenly came to her senses, throwing herself at the door and frantically pounding the new security door. "Claire, open the door. You can't treat me like this. How can you be so heartless?" Her voice gradually changed from curses to pleading. "Claire, Mom was wrong. Mom knows she was wrong. Don't make us leave." "Where can we go?" Brian stood outside making vicious threats. "Claire, just wait. I won't let you get away with this." I drew the curtains, blocking out all outside sounds and light. Then I turned on the sound system and played a rousing symphony. The deafening music drowned out all the crying and cursing. I took out my phone and found Amy's contact information. I transferred $10,000 to her. Then I wrote a final message. "This is the last money I am giving you as your daughter. From now on, we're even." Transfer completed. Without hesitation, I deleted her contact information, blocked her phone number, and severed all possible connections between us. After finishing this, I collapsed onto the sofa, feeling as if all my strength had been drained. Jake came over and held me tightly from behind. He said nothing, simply resting his chin gently on top of my head. "It is all over," he said softly. Warm breath brushed against my ear. At that moment, my tears finally burst forth like a broken dam. I buried my face in his embrace and sobbed. 30 years of grievance, suppression, anger, and resentment poured out with my tears. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation, of farewell, of rebirth. From this moment forward, my life finally belonged completely to myself. The week passed quickly. Amy and Brian didn't move out. Like stubborn adhesive bandages, they camped out in the public hallway area, eating, sleeping, and relieving themselves there, turning the entire floor into a disgusting mess. Neighbors complained bitterly, and property management repeatedly tried to evict them, all to no avail. Then my dear relatives appeared again. They didn't come individually, but formed a mighty delegation of mediators, led by my Uncle Bob blocking my front door. This time they didn't speak gently on the phone but adopted the posture of elders. conducting a moral trial of me. Claire, you've gone too far. Uncle Bob looked pained. No matter what, she is still your mother. How can you force her and your brother to live in the hallway? When word of this gets out, where will our entire family put our faces? Yes, Claire, enough is enough. Don't make this so ugly, an aunt chimed in. Looking at their righteously indignant faces, I suddenly found it quite amusing. I didn't argue with them. I calmly opened the door and invited them in. Please, uncles and aunts, come inside. They were stunned, probably not expecting me to be so calm. After entering and seeing the destruction throughout the house, they began whispering among themselves. I poured water for each of them, then handed out copies of the adoption certificate, property notarization, and Brian's yearly bills, one set per person. Dear elders, before you educate me, could you please take a few minutes to look at these documents? The mediation team looked at each other uncertainly and reluctantly began reading what I had given them. The living room filled only with the sound of papers rustling. Their expressions gradually changed from initial indignation to surprise, then bewilderment, and finally embarrassed silence. I waited until they had all finished reading before speaking slowly. Uncles and aunts, let me make things clear today. First, this house is my legal property, protected by law. Second, Brian has no legal sibling relationship with me. I have no obligation to support him. Third, I believe you all have your own sense of what Amy has done to me over the past 30 years. Today, they must move out. If anyone thinks I am wrong, if anyone thinks I am heartless, that is fine. I looked around at all of them, smiling as I said the words they least wanted to hear. You can take them into your own homes. I absolutely won't stop you. Moreover, I can pay you $1,000 per month in care fees as my respect for my elders. The living room fell silent as death. No one dared respond. Uncle Bob's face turned the color of liver, and his hand holding the water cup trembled slightly. The aunt who had been shouting loudest before now hung her head low, wishing she could find a crack in the earth to crawl into. After a long time, a more distant but reasonable uncle sighed. He stood up, walked outside to the hallway, and began persuading Amy. Sister-in-law, forget it. This house was always Claire's. If you keep this up, you'll only hurt yourselves in the end. Relatives can't help you forever. The mediation team, faced with my devastating countermove, instantly transformed into a retreat team. For their own peace of mind, they began earnestly trying to convince Amy and Brian to compromise. I watched this new drama unfold outside my door with complete indifference. I stepped outside and presented my final terms. Sign this agreement severing our relationship and promise never to harass me or my family again. Sign it. And I'll give you another $50,000 as moving expenses. Don't sign and you get nothing. I'll immediately pursue legal action to forcibly evict you. You'll only be more embarrassed then. I slapped the printed agreement down in front of Amy. Amy and Brian stared at the agreement, then at the tempting $50,000. Caught in fierce internal struggle, human greed and selfishness were fully exposed at that moment. Brian ultimately chose not to be dignified. He was unwilling to lose a sister he could bleed dry, unwilling to give up the house he considered already his under relatives' persuasion. He superficially agreed to consider it, but secretly recorded the squalid scenes in the hallway and Amy's tearful complaints. He carefully edited these videos into a clip titled, "College Graduate Evil Sister Evicts Sick Mother and Young Brother to Seize Family Property," posting it online. In the video, Amy appeared white-haired and heartbroken. He portrayed himself as a helpless, pitiful brother oppressed by his powerful sister. Combined with tragic music and inflammatory text, the video quickly went viral. Uninformed netizens, overwhelmed with sympathy, began viciously attacking me online. My name, company, and position were all doxed. My social media accounts were instantly flooded with vicious curses and threats. This kind of daughter should be struck by lightning. Modern evil sister, absolutely disgusting. The company should fire such morally corrupt employees. Company phones were bombarded, and some extreme netizens even threatened to block me at the office. Overnight, I seemed to become public enemy number one. Mr. Williams called me into his office again. This time, his expression was unprecedentedly grave. "Claire, this situation has negatively impacted the company. The PR department is under tremendous pressure. I believe you, but you need to give the public an explanation quickly." I nodded. "Mr. Williams, give me 1 day." I wasn't panicking because I had prepared for all of this. My lawyer, at my instruction, immediately released a carefully worded, evidence-backed legal statement. The statement contained no emotional accusations, only calm, factual presentation. The attached evidence was far more shocking than Brian's video. First, the redacted property notarization and my identification, proving I was the sole legal owner of the house. Second, the redacted adoption certificate, clearly explaining Brian's true relationship to me. Third, a long compilation of my transfer records to Amy and Brian over the years, totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars, each clearly marked fourth. Screenshots of Brian's vile, threatening messages. Fifth, my police report and documentation from property management and community services about their occupation of hallways and disruption of public order. Each piece of evidence was like a hammer blow, shattering Brian's carefully constructed lies. The facts were clear, the logic complete, and irrefutable. Public opinion reversed instantly after the lawyer's statement was released. Netizens who had cursed me most viciously seemed to suffer collective amnesia, turning their guns on Brian instead. My God, giant baby of the year, 25 and still being supported by his sister, and he has the nerve to play victim. This isn't a brother, this is a parasite. Sister, run. Support the sister. Cut toxic family ties. This kind of family isn't worth keeping. Brian's social media account was reported by angry netizens until it was permanently banned. He and his sob story video became a complete laughingstock. Amy and Brian's names became completely notorious in their hometown relatives' circles. They couldn't withstand this overwhelming public pressure. The next day, Brian voluntarily called me. His voice was hoarse and defeated. "The agreement, we'll sign it." The agreement was signed under the witness of community mediators and several relatives. Amy and Brian, like two defeated roosters, kept their heads down throughout, saying nothing. The moment I signed my name on the agreement, I felt I wasn't signing a document but a severance letter with the past 30 years of my life. They took the $50,000 and, under everyone's gaze, shamefully moved away all their garbage bags. Later, I heard fragmentary news about them from my uncle. They used the $50,000 to rent a tiny apartment in the suburbs. Because of his internet celebrity status, Brian's reputation was completely ruined. He couldn't find any decent job and ended up driving for Uber, working in all weather conditions. Amy, probably having spent all her savings, began washing dishes at restaurants to make ends meet. After hearing this, I felt nothing inside. Those were their own choices and the consequences they deserved. I completely renovated that house, which had held all the nightmares of my childhood and youth. I tore down all the old walls and replaced all the old furniture. The renovation style was entirely according to my preferences, warm, bright, and filled with sunlight. The next Christmas, I didn't go to Florida again. Instead, I brought my in-laws to this completely renewed new home for Christmas. Our family gathered together to make dumplings and watch Christmas movies. My daughter Ruth ran around the spacious, bright living room, her laughter ringing like silver bells. My mother-in-law took my hand, looking at the joy filling the house, her eyes moist. "Claire, from now on, this is your home." I nodded firmly. Yes, my home. Late at night, when Jake and Ruth were asleep, I stood alone at the window that had once made me feel oppressed and suffocated. Outside, thousands of lights twinkled, and Christmas lights sparkled brilliantly in the dark sky. My heart was filled with unprecedented peace and happiness. Warm arms gently encircled me from behind. Jake's chin rested on my shoulder. "Merry Christmas, Claire." His voice was tender and intimate. I turned around, stood on tiptoe, and kissed his lips. After a long moment, we parted. I looked into his eyes and said solemnly, word by word, "Merry Christmas." To my rebirth. That is the story for today. Hope you enjoyed this incredible story. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe for more captivating stories like this, and don't forget to like and share this video. Thank you for being here. See you next time.